Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Kepa for Spoilers. I am your host James Barnes, and today guys I'm joined once again by Brad and Blake, and we are going to be kicking off our Star Wars series talking about the prequels. That is right, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. Now I have to say, I had a lot more fun watching the prequels this time around. I had so much fun watching these. I was like, alright, we're doing positives, we're doing negatives. I don't have that many negatives for some of these. And this is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm so happy to have you guys joining me on this episode.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about the prequels.
Yeah. I have very mixed feelings about the prequels, so I'm real interested to see what you guys have to say.
Yeah, the overall story of the prequels, it's so big. Like, the idea of it is so big, and it sets the stage for what's to come in the original trilogy, and I feel like it does a really good job of that. I feel like it takes some missteps here and there, but it is what it is. That's filmmaking. I don't think George Lucas is that great at dialogue, and that's going to be some of the negatives for some of these movies. But let's dive in with Star Wars The Phantom Menace. 1999. This film made $1 billion, which is crazy, but not really. I mean, Star Wars was gone for how long at that point? 20 years?
Yeah.
So it's like, this is the resurgence of Star Wars, starting with The Phantom Menace as Anakin, with Anakin as a kid. Now, how did you guys feel about watching kid Anakin? Without going into too many things, but how did you feel about them starting off with kid Anakin?
I guess my relationship with the prequels is such like a roller coaster ride, but I loved young Anakin whenever I first saw it. I thought that it was great. I don't remember I was so young at the time, I don't even remember realizing that it was going to be Darth Vader. Like, it was just a whole journey for me, but I loved it when I was younger.
Yeah, I remember loving it whenever I was a kid and recognizing him as the kid from Jingle All the Way.
Yeah.
and because I loved Jingle All the Way whenever I was growing up. Fun fact about me, I watched that movie religiously.
I also love Jingle All the Way.
The Turbo Man doll for my son Jamie. it's the best. But yeah, so I remember liking that performance whenever I was a kid, but as I grew up, it is lessened in how much I love that performance.
Yeah. What did you guys think about the rest of the cast? Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan, Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon. What did you guys think of the cast?
Yeah, we'll get into it, but I think Ewan McGregor is the best part of Star Wars. Like, he's okay. The best casting in Star Wars.
Yeah, I think that he is the standout, as well as Liam Neeson. I think Liam Neeson is one of the best Jedi that we've ever had on screen, and we get very little time with him, unfortunately, but I think that he's one of the best there ever was.
Yeah, most definitely. So let's dive into it. Let's start off with the positives. We're going to start off with The Phantom Menace. Brad, I would like for you to go first this time. Give me some of your positives, or all of your positives, from The Phantom Menace.
So, first off, Ewan McGregor is great as Obi-Wan. Just talked about that, but I think that he holds this whole movie together. To me, seeing this movie not as a child, he's the most, like, identifiable character, I guess, in the movie. As seeing as, like, he's still a Padawan, he's still learning and everything, but he's much more mature than Anakin is in this. I love the pod racing sequence. Pod racing sequence is one of the best things in all of Star Wars. I love the character of Sebulba. I love the character design. I think the voice is great. It's the CG still holds up somehow. Somehow Episode 1 looks better than Episode 2, in my opinion.
Yes, dude, I was going to bring that up.
Absolutely.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But the score is incredible in Episode 1, especially Duel of the Fates. I mean, that's become an iconic piece of movie music because that scene is so... it's just an amazing sequence. Maybe one of the best lightsaber battles that we've had in any of the movies. It's tough to say that I love this movie because there's so much that is wrong with it. But I love pretty much the entire last 45 minutes of this movie. I can say that I unabashedly love it. I love the whole battle between the Gungans and the battle droids. I love the whole
battle? Like, well, the whole battle?
Not the Jar Jar stuff. That's just a sweeping statement about Star Wars. I like it, but not the Jar Jar stuff. I'm specifically having to choose which episodes of Clone Wars I watch because I keep getting turned off of watching Clone Wars because there's so much Jar Jar in that first season. Jar Jar we'll talk about whenever we get to the negatives. Character that doesn't belong in the negatives, though, is Darth Maul. Darth Maul is one of the coolest character designs that we've ever had in Star Wars. He is terrifying. He's badass. He's got the coolest lightsaber there ever was. I think that a lot of the effects hold up, not just the battle droids or the practical effects and everything, but like the CG holds up on almost every one of the CG characters. One that doesn't really hold up well is that Yoda puppet that they have. I don't know what they were trying for with that one in episode 1. Thankfully, we get to spend very little time with it. But the droids look great. Creatures look great. I think the visuals in this movie still hold up to this day.
Yeah. Blake?
So my positives are pretty much the whole movie. I love every second of this movie. Ewan McGregor is amazing. I think that Darth Maul is the coolest looking character in Star Wars. I think the best fight choreography in any of these movies, I'm including all of them, the original movies, the best fight choreography is the Duel of the Fates at the end there. I think this movie has the best score, and that's John Williams. This is one of John Williams' greatest scored movies ever, and it's Phantom Menace. I think that even whenever it's cringy and weird and makes you laugh at the way they're saying things, it's still insanely enjoyable to me. I love that. I can enjoy it on so many different levels, whether it's just the story going through it, and I that's another like huge strength of it is the story, the arc that you get to see set up with Anakin. I know that I'm gonna get hate for this, probably from both of you right now, but I like midichlorians. I like that introduction into the universe. I like the science behind it. I appreciate that. I think that it's cool, and I think that there's a lot that you can explore there. I think George Lucas wanted to keep exploring a lot there. I think that this is the best Anakin performance out of any of the prequels.
Really?
Yeah, I think he's definitely better than Hayden Christensen. Okay. I really like the relationship between him and his mother as well. I like Watto. Watto, I think he looks awesome. I don't like Jar Jar. Like even on the level of like ironic watching, which you kind of have to do with this one. Like they're going up the ventilation shaft. Like just the weird stuff that's going on. Like you kind of have to watch it ironically, and that's where I'm at with this movie and kind of all of these movies. Yeah, we'll get into some more negatives, but that's pretty much a lot of the positives. Is I love this movie. The pod racing too. I mean, pod racing for me that was Star Wars. The ultimate positive of this movie is it feels like Star Wars, which I can't say that for every Star Wars movie.
Yeah, that's a very true statement. This does feel very much like Star Wars. I love the visual effects in this movie. From the opening shot, I'm like, holy shit, this was 1999. This was released in 99. These visuals still hold up really, really well. This was the first introduction to like force running. I thought that was really cool. I think Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are great characters in this movie, even though sometimes they don't have to deliver the best dialogue. This was the first introduction of the Emperor in this universe, him and his back dealings with the Trade Federation. Palpatine is my favorite Star Wars character, period. Him finding a way to become Supreme Chancellor, and he's starting to lay the groundwork for what he inevitably gets. He gets supreme power, and he gets to do all this stuff to build the Galactic Empire, and it all starts here. The score, I agree with you, is the best of all of the prequels. Duel of the Fates is such an incredible score. It might be my favorite Star Wars score, honestly. I agree completely. The fight choreography at the end with Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan is amazing. I think that fight has great tension. Everything works so well. This was the first time we saw a double-sided lightsaber. That was really, really fucking cool. The reveal where he only has one side lit up and then he opens up the other side. I'm like, holy shit, this is so fucking cool. The pod racing. I had pod racing. I can't remember exactly what the game is called, but I had the pod racing game for Nintendo 64.
Oh, yeah.
And I played it for hours and hours and hours. It was just so much fucking fun. And again, I think the pod racing scene has great tension. Anakin is brave in those moments. You can see the Force in him guiding him to what he needs to do next to win the race. Like, I love it, honestly. There are things that I don't like, and we'll get into that. So, Brad, I'm going to pass it off to you. Give me your negatives for The Phantom Menace.
So my negatives are pretty much anything that has to do with Jar Jar and the Gungans in general. I am not a fan of that whole portion of the movie. I think they've got some cool weapons that they use in the last act. That's pretty much all I can say for them. I think that Jake Lloyd is terrible as Anakin, frankly. And it pains me to say, but Natalie Portman is not good in this movie either. And she is one of my favorite actors out there. And I don't know how much of it lays on them and how much of it is the dialogue that they're given, because the dialogue in this movie is terrible. The story is great, but the dialogue is terrible. Blake mentioned it earlier, the racist voices for Newt Gunray and his people, they are the most stereotypical Asian general sounding accents I've ever heard, and it's just crazy to me. The same with Watto. Watto is pretty much a Jewish caricature, and he's stingy, and it's George Lucas was a little bit out of touch, I think, at the time that he wrote this movie.
That's an understatement.
Yeah. I think the midichlorians are bullshit. I do not like that aspect of Star Wars at all. I think that the idea that they're putting forward in the newer trilogy of the fact that anyone could have the Force potentially is a much cooler idea than, you have to be born into it. But that's just personal opinion, I guess. None of the attempts at humor really work in this movie. A lot of them come from Jar Jar, but there's still some attempts at humor, like from oh man, what is it that he says? We were right about one thing, Master. The negotiations were short.
Yeah.
There's a couple of little one-liners in there that I'm like, okay, that gets a smirk out of me. But most of the attempts of humor are just like, no, thank you. The Yoda puppet, mentioned it earlier, is pretty terrible. It doesn't look like Yoda to me. It somehow looks older than Yoda looks whenever he's in the original trilogy, and I don't understand how that works. But yeah, those are pretty much all the negatives that I have about Episode 1. It's very mixed bag for me, but a lot of the nostalgia pulls me through a lot of it.
Yeah, so a lot of the negatives for me are gonna be what you already said. It's Jar Jar. When I rewatch this, I just fast forward through the part where as soon as Jar Jar goes underwater, and they go and meet the Gungans, it's just kind of nonsense, and I don't need it in the movie at all.
You shouldn't have to do that, though.
I feel that. I get you. I understand that, but when I'm watching these movies 4 times a year, I gotta fast forward sometimes, and I'm gonna skip that. It doesn't. The movie can be perfect if I skip that scene, right? I also don't like that Anakin made C-3PO. I think that just kind of creates more problems in the universe than it solves, and I don't really understand the purpose of that being in there. What Bradley was saying, a lot of the racial stereotypes and the kind of just the racism in this movie is very weird, and it's very uncomfortable. That's got to be the biggest negative for this entire movie for me. I think that another negative, I love the pod racing scene, but it only swipes from left to right during the entire movie, and it kind of drives me crazy during that entire pod racing scene. It's just only left to right, little minor negative. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I love this movie.
I have a few negatives. My number one negative, racist Trade Federation aliens. It's ridiculous, dude. Like you already said, it's been said a trillion times. The most stereotypical Asian accent you've ever heard in your life. Everything about it, I think it's disrespectful, honestly. I have Jar Jar Binks' existence. I don't like the Gungans at all. When he goes to the underwater city, there's one of the Gungans that says, "You saw in deep doo-doo."
Yes.
I'm like, what the fuck is this dialogue? Like, he literally steps in shit on Tatooine. He gets zapped by the pod racer laser in the middle, and then his tongue goes numb and he starts to see a bunch of stupid shit. I'm like, this is so annoying. Him bumbling around during the Battle of Naboo at the end, and he just somehow destroys a bunch of droids and all kind of other stuff just because he's just this bumbling idiot on the battlefield. I'm like, this is dumb, and I think he's a useless character. There's this quick scene where Queen Amidala Amidala is standing in a room, and you can see that her dress is plugged in to a wall outlet. Have you guys seen that?
No.
Because the dress has lights on it. It's plugged into a wall outlet if you look really close to it. I think the lightsaber choreography, besides the end, is terrible because they just swing around their lightsabers and you can see that they're not actually looking at anything. It's just X's or the tennis ball, and it's like swing in this direction. It doesn't really look tangible. It looks kind of silly in some points until you get to the end and it's like, well, this is where they put in the work. The ADR for Padme, it's kind of annoying because obviously you switch between Keira Knightley and Natalie Portman so often. It's like, well, they kind of have to have one voice, and then that voice goes away completely in Attack of the Clones. But that kind of bothered me because it's like, it's clearly Natalie Portman, but she sounds like Keira Knightley, and the lip syncing did not go through well in some scenes. That kind of stuff really bugs me. But that's all of the negatives that I have. It's just some things are just really annoying that could have been avoided. The dialogue, like we already alluded to, is really bad. I don't think that George Lucas is really good at dialogue, and he kind of gets his characters to say what they feel instead of showing what they feel for the most part, and it comes off really, really cheesy. But Brad, I'm going to pass it to you. What are your final thoughts on The Phantom Menace?
I think overall it is not the worst Star Wars movie by any stretch of the minds, but it's nowhere near being one of the best Star Wars movies that there is. It's definitely like somewhere in the middle ground for me, just because there is so much that I dislike in it, but the stuff that I love, I really love.
For me, this is my favorite of the prequels. This is one of my favorite Star Wars movies. This is part of the reason I love Star Wars. Like, every time that I watch this movie, it just reminds me of when I was younger and watching this movie over and over again, because it's had to be the one that I watched the most. Star Wars to me is just as much all of the stuff with Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader and the Emperor as it is the Darth Maul and Qui-Gon Jinn and pod racing. I love this movie.
I think this movie gets a little bit too much hate. I think Jar Jar kind of just ruins the experience for a lot of people. But if you go back and you watch it again, what they're setting up in this movie is actually really important to literally everything else that happens. I think there's some really good lightsaber stuff. The score is really great. I think a lot of people should take a deeper look into The Phantom Menace and see what's really good and where you actually have issues with the film. So let's move on to Attack of the Clones. This film made $649 million worldwide. This is my least favorite of the prequels. I think this movie has a lot of problems, and we'll get into that. But Brad, again, we'll start with you. What are your positives for Attack of the Clones?
Really had to look deeply for some positives for this one, but I found some. That's got to be Ian McDiarmid's performance as Palpatine. He was born for this role. Like, he is the Emperor. Ewan McGregor is great yet again, way better than he was in Phantom Menace, I think. This might be my favorite Obi-Wan storyline in the movie, him going to Kamino. I love that whole section of this movie. It's very, very short, unfortunately, but it's I think a very interesting and important part of the Star Wars lore is learning where those clones came from. I love the chase between the Slave One and Kenobi's Starfighter. I love those bombs that Jango Fett has that make that amazing. I just call it the THX noise.
Yeah.
But the chase scene on Coruscant with Zam Wesell is a lot of fun, even if it is a little bit overlong. The creature design is really cool on the creatures during the arena battle. I like that. Don't really like that section of the movie very much, but I like the creatures, and I had all of the toys of it. And that's about all of the good things that I can say about Attack of the Clones, unfortunately.
So Attack of the Clones for me is the worst one out of these three movies. It's actually my least favorite Star Wars movie out of any of them. But positives, I think the arena battle is the creature designs are cool. Jango Fett is a very cool character. I like his design. It's just Boba Fett again, but I think that he does more than Boba Fett does in the movies. I think that he does. I think he's really cool. The Kamino stuff is great. I like that in this movie. Ewan McGregor goes from playing Obi-Wan in the first movie to playing Obi-Wan while also mixing in a little bit of Alec Guinness's accent in there, and you notice that in this movie, and it's really elevated, and the hair and everything, like, he looks so much more like him, and he sounds so much more like Alec Guinness, and he feels like Obi-Wan, the Obi-Wan that we know, and he's growing into that. Beyond that, that's really all I gotta say about positives.
Yeah, this movie it's rough, man. It's a rough movie. So my positives, I really like the Camino sequence. That is my favorite sequence in the whole movie. It works so well. Obi-Wan versus Jango Fett, that was really, really cool. The missiles on the back of the Mandalorian armor still, they don't make any sense to me. It doesn't seem very safe, but it's still cool nonetheless. Anakin slaughtering the Tusken Raiders, I thought that was really dope. Palpatine being given ultimate power to approve the clone army that will then destroy the Jedi and help him create the Empire. Like, Palpatine is just the greatest character. Like, this guy plays the long con and he gets the job done, and he gets everyone else to do the job for him. I love the clone versus droid battle. I thought that looked really, really cool. Some of the CGI is not great. I think the clone troopers look a little bit too glossy. Most of the times I think it could, they should look more, I don't know, like battle hardened, I guess. But I don't know, it just looks a little bit too clean for me. Yoda versus Dooku, that was sick. I think out of everything that Dooku did in this entire film, his battle with Yoda was fucking awesome. This was the first time we got to see Yoda do some really, really cool stuff with a lightsaber, and those are going to be pretty much all my positives for Attack of the Clones. So let's move on to your negatives, Brad.
So my negatives are virtually everything else in this movie. The dialogue, the acting, the CG, it's all just totally lacking, in my opinion. Hayden Christensen is so unbearably bad as Anakin, and he turns him into a fucking creep the first half of this movie, because all he is just obsessed with Padme and thinking about she didn't greet me the way that I wanted her to greet me whenever I showed up, so I'm just gonna sit over here and brood the whole time, and I know I'm gonna talk to Jar Jar about it, and he's gonna be like, cool story, bro, I gotta go do some diplomatic things. Like, it's so bad, and he is just so wooden, and then goes to like 11 and starts yelling. And I get that we're seeing like the formation of the struggle within Anakin Skywalker, but he just comes off as this creepy, needy teenager, and I don't like it. He still even pushes. There's a scene where Padme specifically says, "You're making me uncomfortable," and he looks back and smirks, and he's like, "Yes, my lady," and you're just like, ugh, creep, dude. I'm just not into it. I think Natalie Portman is given some terrible lines to deliver in this movie. The whole sand conversation has to be brought up. It's just bad, man. It's just a bad movie. All of the love story elements are just awful. They don't work. A lot of forced humor in it that doesn't really work. It feels so long, and it is long. It's like 2.5 hours long. Yep. But it feels so much longer than that. And I've got a hot take. I think that CG Yoda jumping all over the place is terrible.
Really?
I don't like it.
Dude,
I feel like it came out of left field. Like, it didn't. I don't know. I will never forget seeing that for the first time and being like, what is happening right now?
He's 900 years old and moves like a complete fucking badass.
It's I don't know. It worked whenever I was a kid. It didn't work for me on this latest rewatch of it. And it had been a while since I'd watched Attack of the Clones all the way through, because it's just a hard movie for me to get through. But yeah, I think that a lot of this movie is just kind of laughable in the bad way. And I really wish that it didn't exist, because I think it's the biggest mark on Star Wars, but you have to watch it to get the whole story.
Yeah.
So it's tough, because it's a really, really dumb movie, but it's a necessary movie for the series.
Yeah.
I completely disagree with you that it's necessary. I think that this movie's unnecessary. Whenever I rewatch all the Star Wars movies, I always skip this one. I think it's terrible. Like you were saying with the dialogue, I think Natalie Portman's the worst she's ever been in her career is in this movie. I think this is the worst dialogue out of any of the movies, easily. This movie's coarse and it gets everywhere. I hate... in the arena battle, whenever it gets interrupted, there's that whole thing where you're following that droid that gets you're following C-3PO and he gets the droid head on him and you're following it for so long and it's so stupid and none of it's funny. I think that the way they they killed off Jango Fett is fucking stupid. I think he's a cool character they could have done stuff with and they just wasted, just like they did with Boba Fett. Like you guys said, the CGI in this movie is worse than the CGI is in Phantom Menace, which is insane. It's offensively bad. There's that scene where they're like in the grass together and there are those weird super fat elephant looking things and they're jumping all over them. It's the worst CGI I think I've ever seen. And this movie has an extreme budget. It's a Star Wars movie. It should look better than this. It came out 4 years or 3 years after Phantom Menace. It should be better than this, and there's really no excuse. I think that beyond the Camino stuff and beyond Ewan McGregor's performance, everything in this movie is largely pointless.
So I don't have a problem with Hayden Christensen's performance in this movie. I've always hated his performance until watching him again today. It's like, you know what? I think the problem is Lucas's direction and his dialogue. I think it's like, okay, well, we got the line out, move on to the next thing. It's like, well, maybe Hayden, that doesn't really work for me. Maybe you're giving off a little bit too much of creeper vibe. Maybe tone it down just a little bit. Like, I just feel like George just isn't good with the dialogue and the direction, and I think that's where he fails because, and we'll talk about it in Revenge of the Sith, but I think he's really good in Revenge of the Sith, and I think he's good in this movie. But negatives, this movie is too fucking long. It feels so long. Revenge of the Sith is pretty much the same length, but this feels like a fucking eternity. Again, Jar Jar Binks' existence, and then he's given Padme's fucking power, and then uses it to give Palpatine all power over the fucking Senate. Like, it's why would you give Jar Jar even more to do? It doesn't make any fucking sense. You guys already said it. Anakin being really creepy. It's really weird. I'm like, dude, I get it. You've been dreaming about her. You've been thinking about her every single night. You want her. We get it. I just felt like it was done in a really, really poor way, and I blame George Lucas for that. Anakin and Padme on Naboo and everything that they do, I don't like it. Them rolling around in the grass, ha 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 ha, we're in love, ha ha ha. I hate it all. And the thing is, when you put it into perspective, you really needed those scenes so that you can show why Anakin turned to Palpatine to do the things that he did to save Padme. You need scenes like that. I think it was just too much. It's taking away from, I don't know, the title of this film, which is Attack of the fucking Clones. I feel like the clones should have been introduced a lot earlier. I think the battle could have happened earlier. It could have been longer. It could have been more than one battle. I just feel like it was just a waste of time to have so many scenes with Anakin and Padme that were just terrible. When he uses the Force to feed her the pear and she takes the bite out of air and you can clearly see that it's all CGI and she's not actually biting anything. It's fucking ridiculous. Dooku versus Obi-Wan, I thought that fight looked terrible. Dooku versus Anakin, that was just a fucking light show. Anakin, he hits this wire, it takes the lights out, and they're just swinging their lightsabers around. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? Is this a nightclub or a fucking lightsaber battle? It's so fucking stupid. And again, it doesn't get good until he fights Yoda, and I'm like, him fighting both of them should have been better, and it just doesn't work. It's so stupid. I believe this is when does he cut off Anakin's arm in this movie?
Yes, because Anakin has the robot arm in Revenge of the Sith. Yeah.
He has it at the end during the wedding sequence with Padme as well. Yeah. So he gets his arm cut off, and it's just an uneventful fight, honestly. I get that Dooku should have won because you want to see the threat of the Sith, but I just felt like they went out like bitches, honestly. It really wasn't that entertaining for me, but that's really all my negatives. My biggest negative is just that it's just too long. It just feels like an eternity, and I feel like once you get to the good stuff, it's at the end of the movie. You know what I mean? But I think the score is fine. It's not as good as Phantom Menace, but it's just fine. It serves the purpose for what it needs to be, but that's about it. So let's move on to Revenge of the Sith. This came out in 2005, and they made more money on this film. This film made $850 million at the worldwide box office. I really, really love this movie. Brad, I'm going to pass it to you. Give me your positives on Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, I generally like this movie. I'm not like head over heels for it, but I definitely like it the best out of any of the prequels. I think that Hayden Christensen is still honestly pretty bad, but he's not nearly as bad as he was in Attack of the Clones, thankfully. Everything outside of the dialogue is great in this movie, but unfortunately it's a pretty dialogue-heavy movie. So that's a pretty big hurdle to have to get over to enjoy it. But, I mean, I think it's worth getting past that, because there is a lot of good hiding in this movie. It's got just awesome action. The final lightsaber battle is awesome, even though it does have a lot of those why are they just swinging their lightsabers in the air moments. Yeah. But it's still a really fun movie overall. Everything with Palpatine is gold in this movie, whether it's serious or I'm laughing at it. Like, the unlimited power is just like so ridiculous, and I love it though. And that whole scene is even though Mace Windu gets taken out like a bitch, it's like, why does that have to happen? But because Mace Windu was always my favorite. Mace Windu and Kit Fisto are my two favorite characters from the prequels. And to see both of them go in this, it was pretty much a bummer. But the entire Order 66 sequence is great. Everything that, like I said, everything that has Palpatine in it, I absolutely love. But yeah, that's pretty much all the positives that I have to say about Revenge of the Sith.
Okay. So I think that this is not my favorite of the prequels. I think this is the best made out of any of these three movies. I think it's really not even close. I think the dialogue is the strongest in this movie. I think that even like Bradley was saying, when the dialogue is ridiculous and I mean, it is bad and sometimes, but the actors play it like on 11, and there's something about this movie that makes me laugh so hard whenever Palpatine is just going all out. I love Palpatine so much, and him doing the unlimited power and everything. I think that this movie has one of my favorite scenes in any Star Wars movie, and that's the Tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise at the Opera House. I think that scene's incredibly important and for the entire Star Wars universe, and I think that what that scene does and what Ian McDiarmid does in that role, in that scene, is he makes the lack of chemistry and the bad dialogue from Attack of the Clones between Padme and Anakin, he makes it believable in that scene where he's explaining the tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise and how you can come back to life. I think that Ian McDiarmid, despite George Lucas' best efforts, makes this movie fantastic. I think that the first 30 minutes of this movie is perfect. I think it's one of the best, if not the best, ship battle that we've ever had, all the way from them starting on the Jedi fighters, all the way to R2-D2 burning down some super droids. I think it's awesome whenever R2 is doing crazy stuff like that. This movie has the least amount of Jar Jar in it, which is fantastic. Natalie Portman's a little better. Hayden Christensen's a little better. Ewan McGregor's a lot better. The "You Were My Brother, Anakin, and I Loved You" is the best moment of acting in all of the prequels, I think. Yeah. This movie is really incredible, especially the first 30 minutes and the last 30 minutes I think are just outstanding. Some of the best stuff we have in Star Wars.
Yeah, dude, I completely agree. Like, my first note in the positives is great opening. Like you said, that first 30 minutes, I'm like, holy shit, that was actually really, this is really, really good. Like, this space battle is dope as fuck. I love Grievous. The intro to Grievous, I think he's such a cool character. I think he also went out like a bitch, but it is what it is. That's spoiler for my negatives. But I love Grievous as a character. I think Dooku versus Anakin and Obi-Wan, I think that was really cool. Anakin killing Dooku, seeing the Emperor sitting there and just telling him, "Good job, Anakin. Now kill him." And it's just like, Dooku's like, "Wait, the fuck? Like, what do you mean, kill me?" And you can just see the evil in Sidious. Like, I love him so much. Palpatine talking to Anakin, like Blake said, at the opera. I love the score, the whole tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise, and how Sidious learned everything from his master and then killed him, which I think says a lot about Rise of Skywalker, and we'll get there. I thought that's some really cool shit. When Palpatine kills all the Jedi that come in to arrest him, I thought that was really dope. It could have been better, because Ian McDermott swinging the lightsaber around looks a little silly at some points, but him killing 4 Jedi, like, I thought that was really dope. Sidious versus Mace Windu, that was a good fight. You can tell that he was only quote unquote losing just to feed Anakin to help him and to turn to the dark side. Anakin killing everyone, the Trade Federation aliens, the younglings, just killing everyone after Sidious tells him to go and do this. Like, I thought that was really powerful, because there's one of my favorite scenes is Anakin on Mustafar, and after he's killed everyone, and he's just standing there and he's crying. You can see that he's in pain, but he's doing it to save the woman that he loves, and I think that's really powerful. I think that's Hayden Christensen's like biggest moment in his whole movie, just him seeing his pain. I think he does a really good job of embodying this pain that Anakin was in. Anakin versus Obi-Wan, that's a great fight. I think it goes on for a long time, and I love every bit of it. There are some things that are a little bit illogical with some of that fight, but I don't care because it's so good. And it's like, who gives a shit? It's Jedi. They'll live. Vader and Sidious standing on the deck of some ship, and they're staring at the Death Star being built. I love that scene. I love the birth of Vader. I love seeing the helmet going on for the first time, him taking that first breath, and that parallel with Padme taking her last breath, and the first breath of his 2 children. I thought that was really well directed. The editing of that scene was really, really cool, and it ending on the John Williams score. I really, really like this movie. This is easily my favorite of the prequels. I really don't have that many negatives when we get into it. So, Brad, go ahead and give me some of your negatives for Revenge of the Sith.
So, my biggest negative has to be the dialogue that Natalie Portman is given in this movie. It's so bad, and it really takes away from what should be some powerful scenes. The whole scene where he's accusing her of being with Obi-Wan is just so, like, teen drama-y, and the Anakin, you're breaking my heart, is just...
That's one of those moments I was talking about where it's like, dude, show me, don't tell me.
Exactly. That's the biggest problem with this movie, is that dialogue, and I wish that we would have gotten either someone else directing or someone co-writing with Lucas, because he obviously was missing something that was there in the original trilogy, which was great fucking dialogue, and it's just not there in this movie. Even Ewan McGregor has to struggle through some scenes. The scene where he says, I saw a holotape of him killing younglings, he covers his mouth like he's trying not to laugh. Like, it's it's pretty rough. I think it's a bummer, because Lucas insisted on writing these movies himself and directing these movies himself, and the ideas there are so good, and the story of Anakin Skywalker is so good, but it's just marred by such shitty dialogue. And that's the biggest negative that I have with this movie, is it makes it a clunkier movie, and everything else surrounding it is so great, but that dialogue just brings it down a whole other level. But yeah, I think it's definitely the best of the prequels, but it's still like a middle ground Star Wars movie for me.
Yeah.
I think that Grievous, like you said before, Grievous goes out like a bitch. I think it's really stupid. I think that Grievous is a lot better, like in the series and stuff that they've done, and comic books and video games and things like that. I think that a lot of the big moments in this movie and the big emotional or dramatic moments are undercut by really bad dialogue, and it's in like key moments, and I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses of this movie is like with some of the other ones I can argue that the worst dialogue isn't in the biggest moments, but with this one it feels like some of the biggest moments there's just really weird dialogue and weird choices that I don't love. I think it's a little bit too long personally. Oh, I thought you were coughing. I think that Palpatine and Yoda's fight is really stupid. I think that it looks wonky. The way that Palpatine falls back in that chair is hysterical to me. It takes him so long to fall from that chair, and then the chair keeps falling, and it keeps falling, and then they're throwing the Senate seats at each other. I think that's like one of the weaker parts because the end of the movie is so good, except for that one little part to me. I also think that this movie, like just with these three movies, the turn from normal Anakin to Order 66 Anakin is not very believable in these movies. I think that you need the Clone Wars show to understand fully why he went to Order 66 Anakin.
Yeah.
While I think that Hayden Christensen is the best whenever like post where he really becomes Vader, whenever Senator Palpatine knights him as Vader, I think that's his best acting, but I think that the turn to that happens pretty quickly in the movie. It's just a little too quick for me, but those are pretty much all my negatives.
Yeah, I see what you mean with that, but it worked for me this time for some reason. I just feel like, I guess knowing the love that he has for Padme from everything we've seen from Attack of the Clones and even from Phantom Menace, like he saw a vision of his mother dying and he wasn't able to do anything about it. You know what I mean? Like he avenged her death, but it doesn't change anything because he couldn't save her. And now he's getting these visions of Padme dying and he wants to prevent that. So it's like for somebody that you love, it's like, well, if the Jedi won't help me, they can't help me, I have to do this. This is my only way through. And I've already aided him killing Mace Windu. I've already passed the point of no return. I'm just gonna do this. That's why it works for me. I look at it from that way. But the first couple times, and I've seen these movies a lot, but every time it's like, this is so quick, it's so stupid. And like you said, in the Clone Wars cartoon, you get so much more of why he makes that turn. You get so much more. There's a point in the Clone Wars, spoilers, where he actually sees the future of himself becoming Vader, and then those memories are erased. So it's like, there's so much great shit. I highly urge you guys, you listeners, to go and watch the Clone Wars series. There's some great shit with Sidious in there. There's some awesome stuff in that series, but my negatives are not that many. I think the Jedi go like bitches. That really, really pissed me off. There's a scene where there's a Padawan who kills like 6 clones, and the Jedi Masters, they all die instantly. They're just shot down. They don't feel anything in the Force. I can't remember his name, but there's one Jedi Master, he deflects like 2 laser bullets, and then he's just gunned down. And then you see all of these different transitions to the other Jedi Masters, and they're just murdered. They don't put up any fight. I like that they die because it feeds the story, but they go out like such bitches. They don't put up any fight whatsoever. I get that they're surprised, but these are Jedi Masters. They go out into the field by themselves and complete entire missions. Like, are you really telling me that they couldn't kill at least 10 of them before they went out? It drives me absolutely fucking nuts. The dialogue is terrible, like you already said, Brad. Anakin, you're breaking my heart. I'm like, fuck me, George. Just show me. Like, the dialogue is so fucking cringy. Darth Vader at the end, no! I think it's so fucking stupid. I'm like, George, why? Is this because Luke says no? Is that why? It's so stupid. The way Darth Vader looks when he's doing it, he just had this incredible moment, this awakening, and then he, when he finds out that Padme is dead, he has this moment of rage where he's crushing everything with the Force, everything is shaking, and then you fucking ruin it when he says no. It's so annoying. It kills it for me. And it's like, well, I'll see Vader in Rogue One and everything else, and then it'll be okay again.
Yeah. Vader in Rogue One makes up for so much.
Yeah.
And I did want to bring up, just real quick, I found this on YouTube on the topic of Vader saying no. If you watch the clip of the French dub of this movie, the actor that yells out no, it is so convincing and it's so impassioned, and it like totally changes the feeling of that scene. I definitely recommend just pause the movie right there and then go to YouTube.
Switch to the French audio track.
And then switch to the French audio track. Watch that for the 3 seconds he says no, and then switch it back, because it's really good. It's just a weird little thing I found on the internet.
Okay, I'll check it out for sure. Because I mean, nothing can be worse than that. It was so bad. What do you have any final thoughts on Revenge of the Sith?
Like I said, I think it's just kind of a middle ground Star Wars movie. Definitely the best of the prequels. But it's not one that I like rush to rewatch all the time. It's definitely my most watched of the prequels, but it's not one that I'm opening my Blu-ray collection and being like, all right, we're going to watch Revenge of the Sith today.
Yeah, I don't rewatch this movie a lot. I don't even necessarily love this movie, because to be honest, this movie came out at a time where I realized movies can be good and bad. You know, before that, I just thought every movie was the best thing ever because it was a movie. And then this movie came out and I was like, oh shit, movies can be bad. And then it made me rewatch the prequels, and I realized maybe they're not as good as I remember them being. So this movie kind of broke my heart whenever I was younger, so it's going to keep it from being like in the upper Star Wars movies for me. But there are moments of this that are some of the best Star Wars moments, and I think that's really where it shines, is with Palpatine specifically. This movie is Palpatine's movie. Don't get it wrong.
Yeah, I love everything that Palpatine does in this film. I love Vader's rise to power. I love Sidious's rise to power. The Empire's rise to power. I think this film actually has really good pacing. Like I said, like we all already said, this film is the same runtime as Attack of the Clones, and it doesn't feel as long, to me anyway, at all. Again, this has great pacing. I think the visuals are amazing, like we talked about with the opening sequence, the whole film, and I think the performances are good. Ewan McGregor, besides that one thing with him Anakin killing the younglings, besides that, I think his performance is fucking incredible. And the pain in Anakin's eyes, the pain in the dialogue that he gives throughout this whole film, he proved to me that he is Anakin Skywalker. I believed everything that he gave me in that film, and this is clearly, easily my favorite of the prequels. Now, I want to talk just a little bit about some Easter eggs from the entire prequel trilogy. Did you guys find anything cool? I believe it's in Attack of the Clones, where you see the Millennium Falcon coming into like a spaceport, I think.
Yeah, I saw that the other day.
Actually, it's in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
That's where you see the Millennium Falcon.
There was actually a scene written for Revenge of the Sith that featured a young Han Solo on Kashyyyk that never ended up happening.
Oh, okay.
And my favorite of any of the Easter eggs in any of these movies, I believe it's in Phantom Menace. You can see the ET race on the Senate floor.
Yes.
And I love that. But I'm always interested to see what would have happened if they would have included like a little like 6 or 7 year old kid that was supposed to be Han Solo, like they had originally planned. But ultimately, that ended up on the cutting room floor if they ever shot it.
Yeah. There was one thing in Phantom Menace. There's this, like, I don't want to call it a doll, but I guess it's kind of like a figure that looks like Maz Kanata to me. And I kind of feel like they made the design of Maz Kanata based off of this thing, unless George already had the idea in his head. But I'm looking at this figure and I'm like, this looks exactly like Maz Kanata. It's kind of weird, but I thought that was really cool and I wanted to bring that up. But do you guys have any final overall thoughts on the prequels as a whole that you wanted to bring up?
I have a very complicated relationship with these movies. I loved the first two whenever I was a kid, and I hated the third one, and then I hated all of them for the longest time, and then the Disney ones came out, and then it made me love the prequels a lot more, and every time that I revisit them, I like them a lot more. I think that just this has nothing to do with the movie itself, I guess, but the best memes on the internet come from these three movies, like hands down, and the entirety of the internet is prequel memes. I think that even when they're bad, they're so entertaining to me, except for a lot of Attack of the Clones. Like I'm talking about the 1 and 3. 2, I think, is just abysmal. I don't even want to watch it again because I just recently had to. I don't want to watch it again. Even when I rewatch them for the new episode, I'm just going to skip it again because I always skip that one. But overall, it's just kind of been a roller coaster of I love it and I hate it. But I'm on this thing now where I really love these movies. I love the story, the overall story arc that they tell. And I love the music in them. I love the imagery, the action figures that came from them. It's just, it makes me happy when I think about it. It feels like Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll echo a lot of what you said. It definitely has a big nostalgia factor for me because I loved these movies and then I hated them and then I liked them and then I didn't really like them. And now I've found things that I love in each one of them. And I'm happy with those. And it's very, like you said, I've got a complicated relationship with them because it is so back and forth, and I don't know if I'll feel the same way about them next year. But right now, I feel like they are a necessity for the story, and there are parts of them that are really enjoyable, but other parts you just got to kind of grit your teeth and bear it through it.
Yeah, you guys said it all. Like, I have a very complicated relationship with the prequels. When I first saw them, I'm like, all right, 1 and 2 suck, and I like 3. And then the more I see Attack of the Clones, the more I hate it. And then the more I see Revenge of the Sith, the more I think this movie is awesome. And then the more I watch Phantom Menace, the more appreciation that I have for it. I think these movies collectively are good because I care more about these characters than I do about the characters in Force Awakens and Last Jedi. Just being completely honest. I've already said it, but I honestly don't care about Finn. I don't care about Poe. I don't care about Rey. I genuinely don't really care much about these characters. I care about Kylo Ren. Mm-hmm. I think he's awesome. I love everything that we've gotten with Leia and Luke. There's some things that I don't agree with, but I feel like Rian Johnson had balls taking it into a different direction. But if you had to put them side by side, I'm going with the prequels. We'll see what happens with Rise of Skywalker, but we will get there. And next up, we will be reviewing the original trilogy. I am really excited to be talking about the original trilogy. Those movies are just some of the best sci-fi movies ever made. They made George Lucas's career. It changed cinema forever. Everything about the original trilogy is why I love Star Wars, and I can't wait to get into it. Guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Make sure you follow us all over social media at C4 Spoilers. If you want to find all of the podcasts on the Careful Foot Spoilers podcast network, all you have to do is head over to carefulfootspoilers.com/podcast, and you will find the Best One Worst One podcast, the Careful Foot Spoilers podcast, and the You've Got to See This podcast. Again, guys, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you guys next time.